All right, guys, I guess we're going to get started. There may be a few people that come in. If it's just us, then it's going to be more personal. But we have some people live streaming it, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. So today's topic, obviously, we've been talking about a few different things this year, but this is the legal clinic based on business development and entrepreneurship. So first of all, my name is Sunny, for the two that are here and the two that are over here. So just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I practice here in Texas. I have other businesses as well, so he's seen me in one of my other businesses, and you guys know me pretty well. So we're going to go ahead and move in, and we're going to start by talking about a few of the different types of business entities that are out there. So in my previous lecture earlier this year, I did talk about all the different types of entities that are out there, but obviously we'll just go ahead and go through them a little bit. There's a lot of details. I ended up having to cut down almost 20 slides, or she helped me with it, rather, but we cut down about 20 slides because I just couldn't pack that much into this short lecture. But there's a lot to learn, and so we're going to go ahead and get started with sole proprietorship. Sole proprietorships are basically you working for yourself. There is no entity at all. There's just you working for yourself. So pretty much everybody who says, I have a DBA, I have a DBA, that's what that means. So a DBA will typically be something like a assumed name certificate, fictitious name. All you do is you pay 20 to 50 bucks to your state, whatever the state you live in. You're going to file with them, basically say, hey, this is the name I'd like to operate under, but you're technically operating by yourself. What that does is you are your business, which means there is no legal separation. So legal separation is an important part of being in business, right? So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But first things first, we're going to talk about a taxation aspect of it. Taxation means that you're going to get taxed at your personal level. So whatever you get, you're going to be taxed at. So let's say you have a job and you open up like a little side hustle of some sort, right? You're going to basically add that to your income. So if you're already paying 25% tax, 24% tax, whatever your tax bracket is, income that you earn and whatever your business is going to be that tax bracket. Looks like the camera cut off, so hang on one second. Oh yeah, my battery died. I have another. It's over here. The battery died quick. Well, for those of you that can't see me, you can still see the slideshow, so that's okay. We're going to keep going. Sorry for that. But yeah, so we were talking about sole proprietorships. We're talking about how they're separate entities, but they're not separate entities. They're the same as you. All right, so we're going to talk about the liability here. Liability means that anything that you get is on you. So we're talking. I'm trying to get my train of thought back, but we were talking about, okay, a side hustle. So side hustle means that you're gonna have a side business of some sort. You're gonna have your tax bracket, whatever you're paying. So if you made $50,000 that year, if you add another $4,000 or $5,000, you're gonna be taxed at that same tax bracket, right? So that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that technically, but just keep that in mind for whenever you're setting up a business. So that's what you call pass-through taxation. It's directly to you. Okay. Liability with a sole proprietorship, you're gonna be paying all the liabilities because it is your name, right? So everything that you own is subject to the liabilities of your business. So if you end up opening a business, that's what's going to happen. We're going to talk about partnerships. So partnerships here, just quickly, there's a few different types, and I can go into quite a bit about it. But a general partnership, pretty much it is an agreement to do business, an agreement to do business with anybody. Let's say I have one person from this side and one person from this side say, hey, let's go out and sell pancakes. Why, I don't know. But let's just go sell pancakes, and we're going to make 20%. That is technically a partnership. That is a general partnership. So you technically don't have to have anything in writing. You don't have to register anything with a general partnership, especially here in Texas. The difference with something like this is that now you have two people involved. So with a general partnership, everything is shared, including the profits and the losses. So let's say you have you and another person doing business. One person goes out and buys a printer worth $5,000, and another person goes out and buys a jet worth, $250,000. But you only have $50,000 in your bank. you're both liable for that. You're both liable for that. And there's no question about it. If he buys that jet and you didn't agree to that, but he has authority to do that, then you're screwed. You have a jet. You're either going to have to pay for it or you're going to go into bankruptcy or something. So that's the situation with that. I almost never see general partnerships anymore, but most people who are doing business, something small, they're in a partnership and they don't realize it because essentially they say they're doing something as a hobby. Hobbies are businesses to a certain extent as well. I mean, as far as liabilities go, tax aspect, it's not always the case. Okay, so limited partnerships, it gives you kind of what you're traditionally thinking of as a protection layer. So typically in a limited partnership, you have one person who has all of the risk and another person who has basically just invested into the business. That means this person who has all of the risk gets pinned with all of the costs and everything of doing business. That's an okay system to set up as well. That typically you have to set up an agreement and you have to file it with the state, whatever state you're in. And it's not a big liability and it's not very expensive, but that is something to keep in mind. Limited liability partnerships, that is basically, it's almost an alternative to an LLC or corporation, except it is more of a partnership. So the partnership structure is different technically from a corporation. So you have different divisions. In a corporation, you have a few more nuances, but we're going to get into those as we go into the next slide. But with a limited liability partnership, that means everybody who's in that partnership is limited. Okay? So that means if you have 4 people, all 4 people are limited by the actual protection of the law. So that's something to keep in mind for that as well. There's also an additional, it's a PLLP. A lot of doctors, lawyers, accountants, they're going to use PLLPs. Those are professional limited liability partnerships. Sometimes PLPs, because one person has a license and the other people are investing. So depending on the industry that you're in, you're allowed to do that. Taxation, same thing. Unless you specifically say otherwise, typically it's a pass-through. That means individually it goes to each person who's in that partnership, just like in a sole proprietorship. So something to learn from that is that partnerships are not always the best option. They're okay sometimes when you're doing small business, but it's really not the best situation. Do you have something you're going to ask? Sure.
Partnerships, is that still like a separate entity? Like if I have a day job and I want to partner with them, is my collateral everything that I have aside from the business?
No. So in a general partnership, no. Everything that you have is a part of that partnership technically because you are a part of that partnership. So that means if you had a house and a car and you decided you want to open up a hot dog stand, well, something goes wrong with that hot dog stand, it rolls off the side of the sidewalk and runs over somebody, that person sues you for $250,000, $300,000. You don't have that in the bank, that's going to come from somewhere, it's going to come from your house. That's why I never ever recommend a general partnership of any type. There's always some type of agreement. It always should be set up as either an LP, LLP, PLLP, something like that. Okay, so you're not separate. Even in these situations, sometimes you're not even separate. You've got to be careful about how you devise that. Okay, so he asked, just generally speaking, he asked if you're separate from your own entity. In this situation, you're usually not, and that's why your pass-through entity taxation is applying because you're getting that legal protection to a certain extent of being set up as a business, which means that certain laws apply to you as a business, but it's not necessarily separate. So we're going to go ahead and go on to corporations because I was just talking about those. Corporations very quickly there's really just one type of corporation. There's just a corporation. When you hear C corporation and S corporation, that's the tax status. So tax status is something you file with the IRS to typically differentiate how your business is actually going to be set up and how it's going to be taxed. So C corporation, that's what you typically hear for like big companies. C corporation means that your corporation is actually filing a tax return, but then anything that you get paid, you file a tax return on that as well. And that's not a bad thing always. There's very, very common situations where that's a good thing because your business is making so much, it needs to have a separate tax status versus you, and you're making a certain amount. So that's okay to do. So we're going to talk about S corporation. S corporation is similar to how we were talking about pass-through. Pass-through means that, okay, let's say you're here, you're playing catch with yourself. You're throwing money here, and it's going on to your tax return, right? So that's what a pass-through entity is. Anything that you make comes through your company, passes to you and it goes onto your tax return, typically in the form of a Schedule C or something like that. So usually it's going to be up to your tax person to set that up, but usually Schedule C. What that means is that the same thing I was telling you guys about, if your tax bracket is at a certain amount, then anything that you make is going to be at that tax bracket. We're going to talk about LLCs and PLLCs. So those are limited liability companies. Those are not corporations. They are not the same. So people a lot of the times will say limited liability corporation. I've seen a situation, if you're not careful about it, if you say limited liability corporation, people are going to assume that you're a corporation, which means that you're not a company, which is a very small nuance, but it is very important if you're dealing with millions of dollars. So you have to be very careful about it. The difference here is that with a corporation, there are a lot of formal requirements that you have to have. You have to have a president. Sometimes you have to have a board of directors. You have to have shareholders. You have to have specific meetings every year. They have to be done in a very specific format. If you don't make a company agreement, then something can go wrong. Then you're facing potential issues with, the laws. So corporations are not always a bad thing, and they're not always a good thing, but they must be right for you. So LLCs are typically made for the less sophisticated person, not necessarily as in, okay, I can read and write, yes. But the point, what I'm trying to make is somebody who's never made a business before, who's never operated a business before, this is made for you as a person to get started. Now, you can continue to use these for the rest of your life, and there's no problems with it. LLCs are really only about 30 to 35 years old. They started in about the late 80s, early 90s. They were more developed because, like I was telling you with corporations, you had a lot of filing requirements. There were a lot of specific things that you had to do. Now that creates a lot of complications. Come on in. That creates a lot of complications whenever you're in a situation where you've missed a deadline to do something, and now you're liable for all these, whatever the amount of money is. Any money is too much money if you can avoid it, right? PLLC, like I was telling you guys, for the PLLPs, PLCs, that's specifically for a situation where you have a lawyer, doctor, CPA. Sometimes, depending on the state you're in, even electricians can be, depending on what level they're at. There's special protection, and there's potentially more loan opportunities if you're set up. If you go to a bank and you have a PLLC or PLLP, they're going to take you a little bit more seriously. You've already gone through the havoc of getting your license, and typically they respect that a little bit more because you're more trustworthy. If you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to school, you're operating, your license is valid, they're going to assume that you're a little bit more capable to handle your money. So that's the benefit of doing that a lot of the times. I have a PLLC because I am a lawyer, so just a situation. So that was a pretty brief description. There's a lot more that you can go into. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to me. By the way, there is on our website, if you go to www.ctlegal.com, you can go on. There is a little icon on the screen right underneath the logo. You click that, it gives you the download to our business guide. Basically, it's everything that you need that I'm talking about today as far as structuring wise. It's not everything in this whole presentation, but that's the benefit of tuning in. So we're going to talk about where to open up your business, right? So we're here in Texas. That's where we're talking about predominantly because most of the people I deal with here in Texas. But I also open up business with people all over the country. And you can technically live in any state and open up an entity in any state. So Texas, why do we open up businesses here? Well, franchise tax. Franchise tax is technically sales tax. Sales tax is what you would get in any other state. Typically, you have to pay sales tax on certain services and on certain things you buy and sell. If you miss that, if something happens, sales tax could be the bane of your existence. It can make things really easy for you, can make it really hard for you. But franchise tax, that is not necessarily a benefit. That is just something that you have to do here in Texas. And a benefit that you do get by being here in Texas is there's no state income tax. And then there's also regulations really, really favorable for businesses. So that means they're in the courts, if you were to have any issues, typically the judges are going to lean more towards you because the law is favoring you. So that is a benefit of being here in Texas. One of the downsides of being here in Texas is that those courts are actually kind of commingled. So you have to go through the same courts that somebody's having a dispute with somebody who hit their car potentially, depending on how big your amount is. So that is one of the downsides. Move on to Delaware. Has anybody heard of a Delaware corporation or Delaware LLC? Okay, well, the people here who have not, that's okay. Delaware is the most common place in the country to open up your business. It is the #1 place in the country. More businesses, corporations, and LLCs are opened up there than any other place in the whole country, because they've had a system in place for the past almost 100 years, special legal system to allow you to learn and really adapt. So if something happens in the courts, they take it and put it into the code, into the law right away. So that means now, if you have any questions, it's in the law. You don't have to go hunt for anything. They make it very, very easy, very, very quick, very, very smooth for you to navigate. It's the home of majority of the Fortune 500 companies. You get a lot of special options. Really, Delaware can give you, if you incorporate there, you can also get bank loans. You can also get licensing depending on where you're in, whatever industry you're in. So there's a lot of benefits that you can gain out of that. So keeping that in mind, that may be a good option for you if you decide to open up a business. Nevada is another really common option. Nevada is a good state because there's no corporate or state income tax. It does have strong personal asset protection, and there is something called charging order protection, which we're going to get into next. Wyoming is also a really, really common place. Little do we know, Wyoming gives you a lot of protections that we don't realize that you could actually benefit from. Same thing, asset protection, low annual fees. I think the $100 fee. I think Delaware is more expensive than Texas. Nevada is less expensive than Texas. Texas is $300. But Wyoming is about $100, and then you technically just need a registered agent in that state. That's all you would need to get that started. So it has minimal reporting. What that means is, and this is one of the biggest reasons that people go to Nevada or Wyoming, Wyoming really, is that you have no reason to report your name to the state. That means you can open up a business there and they don't know it's you. They know it's you. They can find out it's you. That's not necessarily difficult because you owe them that by law. But what it is that if you go to here in Texas, I can look up your company name, I can find out who owns that company, and I can find out what their address is. That means if I need to find out if, this guy over here has an issue, I know the name of his company, I look it up, I can go to his house, knock on his door, and be like, hey, give me my money. Nobody wants that. In Wyoming, they make it very difficult to do that. They have a lot of protections in place, and they don't create it public knowledge. You can't necessarily just call them up and say, hey, who owns this company? Tell me where they live. They're not going to tell you that. That's a huge benefit if you're trying to privatize your assets. I have a company in Wyoming, and I'm learning all the ins and outs of doing that from a personal standpoint, but I set these up for people all the time. So it's a great experience just to learn something new. So if you're interested in learning about that, I'll be able to teach you guys. But these 4 states are really the most common ones that I deal with. So we're going to go ahead and go on to charging order protections. So most of you guys, I don't think anybody's probably heard of charging order protection here. So you've heard of company protection. So whenever you set up a business, what happens is, why do we set up a business? Just like we were talking about earlier, we set it up from the top down level. So you take a loan through your business fails. Now you can't handle that loan, or that amount is no longer something you can handle, right? Let's say $100,000. You have about $70,000 in assets, and that's the max you can give. Well, you pay that $70,000, close down your business, and that's it. If you didn't pay, if there was no personal guarantee, they cannot come after you personally. All right? That being said, if you did something illegal, if you did some kind of misconduct or fraud, that can be held against you, right? Because nobody wants anybody to benefit if you're doing something illegal. That's just the way things are. With most states, they can still get you from the other side, though. Okay? So that means in the same situation, you've got a $100,000 loan, you're paying on time, you have $70,000 in assets. But from a personal side, you owe $200,000. Well, now they can come after your business assets because you're the owner of that business. They can do that here in Texas, they can do that in the neighboring states, Oklahoma. There's a lot of risks that we don't necessarily think about. We always think about, okay, what if my business goes bad? I want to protect my house. I want to protect my cars, things like that. Well, what if my cars and my house cause problems and now my business is at risk? Well, that's what a charging order protection law does. That gives you protection from the other side. So that means you're here in the middle. Nobody can touch you from here, and nobody can touch you from here. And I'm not saying it's perfect. That does take work. It takes understanding, and it takes a little bit of patience. But to get there, there's a lot of things you can do. Okay, so that's really, really important. So it protects the entity from personal creditors, claims against a member or a partner. Same thing I was saying. It protects you and your business from something that, let's say you had a partner. If you were going back to a partnership, for example, right? We were talking about how if the actions of one partner can impact another partner. Well, in the same situation here, they can't come after your business assets if you have that charging order protection. If you're in, sometimes we know that we're going to be really, really, money savvy. We're in business with somebody. We know that there's going to be a lot of really good things ahead of us, but somehow this partner just is a terrible, terrible person with money. Now they've racked up a lot of money, and now they're coming after the business assets. Well, they have a limit to what they can come after. The limit is however much percentage that person owns in that company. But who wants some random person coming into their company and biting chunks out? That's not what we want. All right? So again, charging order protection is very, very important, but it's only available in Alaska, South Dakota, Nevada, Wyoming, and Delaware. All right? So very, very important situations. Welcome. So this is one of the most common issues that I deal with. I would say majority of business owners fail to set this up at the onset, and a lot of the times it gives problems. I'm going to give you guys an example of how it turned into a really, really big problem without this. So an operating agreement. So let's take a situation again. I deal with a lot of situations, and so I like to give examples in that same fashion. I set up a business. I have 2 partners in this business. We're going well. We're working well for 1 year. In the second year, one of my members, one of the business owners, whatever the case is, he's causing problems. He doesn't want to do his job. We want to kick him out. Well, if we don't have anything written, then the state laws apply. The state laws are very vague. They're not meant for you to do everything with ease, and that's unfortunately the case. So let's say we need to kick somebody out. Well, now we've got to rely on the state laws, which means we've got to hire a lawyer, which means we've got to file a lawsuit, which means that this can take a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. And guess what? It can also cost a lot of money, right? So the situation that we're in, I'll tell you a situation that one of my clients previously was facing, and I think he's still dealing with the lawsuit. I'm no longer helping him with it because he has a practicing, like a very, very experienced litigation attorney, and I'm not a litigation attorney. So that's just to put that out there. But he has a gas station down in Dallas somewhere. His situation is that he has 2 partners, just like I was describing. One person he's kicking out. Well, that partner is refusing to leave. They're refusing to negotiate. They're refusing to do whatever they need to. We make an agreement. They come back and they say no. They make an agreement. They come back and they say no. They're refusing to do what they need to. Well, I charged them several $1,000s. Couldn't get to any solution. And it took about a year of trying to get there, right? The same situation came where it needed to hire a lawyer. Well, now that person's about $60,000 in legal fees in, and they're still not out of it. And I think that whole issue started about 3 years ago. So can you imagine being in a situation where this person only owes this person about $100,000? So $100,000 just to get them to leave, but now you've paid almost half that or more than half that just to deal with legal fees and trying to get them out. That can cost a lot of money. Now we're talking about one situation. Think about how often this might happen. And honestly, this could have been very, very easily avoided had they set up an operating agreement. Well, funny thing is that they did. They did set up an operating agreement. But the problem is that they relied on their CPA in Oklahoma, I believe, and their Oklahoma CPA set up the operating agreement in Oklahoma law, which doesn't apply to Texas. It's not a Texas company. Well, it is a Texas company, but the laws of Oklahoma can apply, but they don't apply in this situation because it doesn't make any sense. Well, the second thing is that they didn't sign the agreement. Well, it was a waste of money, and had they relied on somebody to help them or do it themselves, they would have done it right, probably. Trusting other people is always kind of a risk, but one thing that I want to kind of preface here is that I don't have anything against CPAs. CPAs are great at their job, but their job is not to represent you legally. Their job is to set you up for tax success. Now, there's a lot of CPAs out there who set up your company, your corporation. They can set up your LLCs. That's very, very common for CPAs to do. And technically speaking, they can't be penalized for it, but also technically speaking, it is considered unauthorized practice of law. It's become a custom. It's become very, very common for people to do that, but I would not rely on them to legally protect you. Tax-wise, go to them, make sure you get all of your stuff done, but make sure you always learn your tax and your legal implications at the same time, because you could be in the hole. And one mistake from one person who doesn't necessarily know everything can cost you a lot of money. So make sure you cover yourself on both sides. I don't know everything tax-wise, and they don't know everything legal-wise. So we have to work together, okay? Operating agreement, just a quick, I didn't really tell you guys what it is, but it's basically the manual for how your business is run. So it says, okay, our business is for this reason. If we make profit, it goes here, it goes here. If somebody needs to leave, this is who votes. This is the percentage that's needed. This is how that's done. So that's very, very important. If you're operating a business with anybody, this is the most important thing you can do. All right? So business tax deductions, capitalizing on opportunities, essential for minimizing taxable income, increasing profitability, and you should navigate the tax code to leverage applicable deductions. So what that means is, it sounds really, really drawn out and complicated. Most people stop listening as soon as they say business tax deductions. It's just okay. That's no problem. But this is not really the most exciting thing to talk about. But if you're in business, this is very important. So let's talk about a good situation. You're doing really well in your business. All of your partners are doing really well. There's no problems. You're starting to make lots of money. Now you have so much money that you don't know what to do with it. And you need to spend it. Why do people need to spend money when they have too much? Well, so they can not pay it to the government. The government has its benefits, but we don't need to pay everybody everything, right? That's my belief. I personally don't believe that taxation is even legal. But, it's not written in the Constitution anywhere, and so, that's my situation. But we have taxes, okay? And so because taxes are a thing, we have to learn how to deal with them, right? So startup costs. Startup costs, when I mentioned we were talking about this event, I wanted to talk about startups. I wanted to talk about experienced business owners. Experienced business owners can use this as well, but let's say you're starting a new business. Well, in law, you have up to $5,000 in your first year to deduct taxation. Let's say, okay, I'm going to give, before I read this all out to you guys, because everybody here can read, I hope. And so I can imagine that me reading this wouldn't help. I do want to explain it though. Let's say you've got $50,000 in startup costs this year, right? It's $50,000. Out of that $50,000, you can deduct $5,000 right now. That remaining $45,000, well, the lights changed. The remaining $45,000 can be deducted and depreciated over the next 15 years of your business, all right? But let's say you have an excess of $50,000. Let's say you do $50,500. Well, now you can only deduct $4,500 this year, and you can deduct the remaining amount over the next 15 years. The law gives you the ability to deduct up to $5,000 in your first year. That means anything that you do to set up your business. There's a lot of things that you can set up. Come on in. You're fine. There's a lot of things that you do when you're setting up your business that are very, very valid and very, very important for you to use. And these costs can be beneficial to you. All right? So I'm going to talk about, let's say somebody's opening up a restaurant, right? And they need to go out and research all of the taco restaurants that are available in that situation, in that city. And they need to learn, okay, what do my competitors do? Well, they go out and spend $1,000 in tacos that year to learn who's good, who's bad, what recipes work, which ones don't work. That whole $1,000 is deductible. That means you eat good and you feel good because you're opening up your business and it's usable for you. Same thing, business plan. Let's say you're setting up a business plan, research expenses, borrowing costs, anything that you do to set up your business, even legal fees, even accounting fees, anything that you do technically can be used if it's in the right category. We're having a party in here, so anybody who's seeing with the lights, y'all see what's up. Okay. I don't think she's realizing that the remote over there is affecting the lights here, but as long as you guys can see me. Okay, so here are 5 very common IRS deductions that are really important for you guys to know about. And then the next slides, we're actually going to go into a lot more depth, but Section 162, deductions for all ordinary and necessary business expenses. That means things like operating costs, things that you would do on a regular basis, those are deductible from your business. Immediate deduction of certain capital expenses, that's 179. A lot of people hear about, okay, I bought a G-Wagon through my business, right? I bought a Lamborghini for my business. How and what reason would you need that? Like, that doesn't make any sense. I I pick up trash for a living. Why do I need a Lamborghini? There doesn't make any sense. There's no connection, right? But in law, if your vehicle classifies as over 6,000 pounds and was made at a certain year, if it was made, I think, before 2022, then you can deduct 100% of that this year. Let's say you have $500,000, and now you owe a 39% tax rate on that. So 39%, let's say 40% tax of $500,000 is about $200,000, is it not? I hope my math's right. About $200,000. Now, I need a Lamborghini all of a sudden, because if I buy that Lamborghini and I use that today, use that whole deduction today, that means instead of paying the government that $200,000, I have a Lamborghini and I only owe them whatever the difference may be. If I have other operating costs and expenses, then now I don't owe anybody anything and I'm living good. This is how the rich people live, and this is how we want to live, but we don't actually know how to do that. Well, getting a good CPA or tax person can actually help you with that, or learning how to do it yourself. I typically do it myself, but there's nothing wrong with learning. You have a question? Sorry, say again?
Did they change that rule after 2022?
Yes, they changed that rule quite a bit after 2022 because a lot of people were kind of overusing, not necessarily overusing it, but the IRS kind of realized how common this was becoming for people. I mean, you can go on YouTube and find out, should you buy this for your business through your LLC and like this and that. There's a lot of people out there teaching these things, and that's great, right? But what that means is that more people are taking advantage of it, and that's less money in the pocket of the government. And the government doesn't necessarily care if, it's being used right or wrong. They just care about the bottom line. Go ahead.
Where can we find out the information to see if it's accurate? Like, where can we find out what the restrictions are to see if it's accurate? Like, because it's changed.
Oh, yeah. So there are publications on the IRS that are constantly updating. So publications are almost like small articles that they put out on a regular basis. If you go on their website, you can kind of search it up. Even you could just Google it. It should typically take you to the IRS website. Be careful where you get your information, but it's very important. You can find all of the information that you need about the tax code in the IRS website or on the tax code websites. There are these specific websites that kind of compound all the tax information, and it gives it to you in a very smooth and clean format. But 179, it has changed, but what that means now, I think in vehicles after 2022, I think they are only deductible up to 80%. And I could be wrong. I didn't dig too far deep into it, but we can definitely find out. It's not too difficult. Let's go ahead and move on, because I do want to get through the rest of these really quick and open it up for all the questions. I mean, we have a few people here who could probably ask quite a bit of questions. Section 199, 20% of unqualified business income for pass-through entities. Amortizing startup costs over time. That's what I was talking about. That startup cost of $50,000 that you get, up to $5,000 is deductible to this year, and then the rest has to be amortized or depreciated. That's a fancy word for saying depreciation. 263, uniform capitalization rules, capitalizing particular costs to inventory. That means anything that if you sell stuff in your business, inventory can be considered deductions or expenses. Deductions and expenses are not the same thing, but for the purposes of today, we're talking about them together. So I have quite a bit of information here. These are really the most common and the most utilized deductions that you use in every single business. And even if you were to use TurboTax or something else, I just want to quickly hit each topic, at least identify them so that everybody understands. Okay? Welcome. I can't see your face, but I think I know who you are. I see the hair. So, home office deduction. Home office deduction, let's say you have a home office. If you're starting to do something, you can use the percentage of your home, and that can actually be deductible on your taxes. That's a huge benefit. Vehicle expenses, things like you can go at it from two different formats. You can do standard, or you can do itemized. And so let's say you're to do standard. Well, that means you're going to do, I think the average, or I think this year it's giving 61 cents per mile. So let's say you're driving, let's say if you have a vehicle, right? I don't know how many people know this about this, but this year, it changes every year. But let's say you have a business and you need it for your, you need a car for your business to travel here and there. And let's say you put 50,000 miles on your car. Well, now you can take that 50,000 miles and use the standardized deduction for it and multiply that by the rate that year. And if we're using 60, let's just say 60 cents per mile and 50,000, that means you have $30,000 in deductions right there. And all you did was just drive. Yeah, that's a huge thing. That's a huge, huge thing. I mean, most people, that's how they get away with not paying any taxes at all. If you're an AC person and let's say you need to go out and do these AC repairs at all these different places, and you end up driving that 50,000 miles and all the income that you earn, that's pretty much washed away the taxation on it. All right, so that's a huge thing. Vehicle expenses are really, really important. If we were to go itemized, we could talk about it from a very individual standpoint. That means oil changes, car tires, you need to get your belts changed, you need to pay your car payments. Those are itemized. Sometimes if those outweigh the amount that you're spending as far as mileage-wise, then use that, but it's your choice to use, okay? Salaries and wages, typically anything you pay out of your business is an expense, so that can be used to bring your profit down and therefore reduce your taxation. Rent and lease payments. So that means if you were to rent something for your business, if I'm renting a storage unit, if I'm renting an office, if I'm renting somebody's backyard for my business, for example, it doesn't really matter. All of that is tax expensable, or it's inexpensible and it reduces your taxation, okay? So any money that you spend in that sense. Depreciation, we were talking about that just a bit ago, but depreciation can apply to a lot of things. Let's say you buy a huge printer, you buy a huge machine that's really, really important, like a laser machine or an engraver or something like that. Depending on your industry, you can depreciate that. So that business needs this type of asset. You purchase it for, let's say, again, $50,000 because it's a common number. Now you can take that and depreciate that over 10 years, and that means over 10 years you can depreciate up to $5,000 in taxes off of your tax due bill. Utilities, phone, internet, things like that. Professional fees, lawyers, not entrepreneurs, lawyers, accountants, CPAs, things like that. All of that is tax deductible. So that can be used to reduce your taxation. Office supplies, you need pens, pencils, things like that. Advertising and marketing costs. This is only available once you've started your business, not before, right? So that's really important. Anything that you spend money on can be really beneficial to you. Taxes and licenses. So that means, let's say you need to set up your business in a particular county and they require you to have a permit or a license or something like that. That is tax deductible. Travel, business-related expenses such as airfare, lodging, hotels, food, things like that. Well, we're getting into food into the next slide, but that's really helpful. All of that can be tax deductible to a certain extent. You should look at the sections pertaining to those. So we were talking about dining while you're on vacation or well, vacation is not the right word. People travel for work and sometimes they consider that vacation, but you can look at it as a vacation, but you can also use it if you're doing business on that trip as a business expense. Dang, they're having a good time with these lights. Okay, so dining. If you are dining and you're taking clients out, well, that can be potentially 100% tax deductible, okay? But let's say you're going out and you're traveling and you're spending money and you're going to this hotel for a conference. Well, that's 50% tax deductible. If you're buying pizza for your employees, if you're buying pizza for your employees because they're working late, that's 100% tax deductible. So there are a lot of things that you can use to actually benefit you there. Insurance, the cost of insurance is tax deductible. Interest rates, let's say you take a business loan, let's say you take a car loan, all of that interest is deductible, okay? Charitable contributions, just like if you were to give something to the Goodwill or the Red Cross or something like that, tax deductible. Make sure you get the slip because in the case of an audit, you could be out of luck. Education and training costs, that means seminars like this one, obviously this is free, but if you were to pay for it for the purposes of your business, tax deductible. Healthcare, that means anything that you pay through your business for your health insurance, life insurance, SPAs, any of those funds that you use for, well, healthcare is one thing, but retirement plans, that's what I was going to get into next. You can apply it to your 401ks, your IRAs. They have self-employed as SEPs, I think they're called self-employed plans. Those are specifically meant for self-employed people. You can take a lot of your tax due and put it into there. Let's say you've maximized all of your deductions in all these different fashions and forms, and you still have another $40,000 due. Well, now you can contribute that to a self-employed tax plan, and that's tax deductible as well. That's not cut and dry like that. There's obviously a lot to learn. But bad debts, let's say you need to pay an old debt that's in collections. Well, that's tax deductible. Bank fees, that $10 a month, that $20 a month that you get charged just randomly for your money sitting there, that's tax deductible. Moving expenses. You need to move from one office to the next. Let's say your business is involved with moving. All of that is tax deductible. Research and experimental costs, if you're a scientist or if you're into something, research and development, all of that is tax deductible. That's why companies and businesses put so much money into that. Pharmaceutical companies, they put so much money into R&D that all of that is tax deductible. That's free money for them. That means they get to spend it where they want to, get stuff that makes them profit, and everybody wins in their company. And then contract labor, let's say you hire independent contractors, freelancers. Those things are tax deductible. So the main thing is there's a lot of things that you guys can use, and I would like the reason I put so much onto these slides is because these are every day. These can be done every day of your business. That means anything that you spend, the snacks that I got for you guys. I mean, no offense against you guys, but I spent the money because I needed to, right? Not because I necessarily wanted to feed you guys. I'm just joking. But that's my point, right? I want everybody to be happy here, and hunger is one of the easiest ways to get there. But it's important to realize how beneficial and easy it is to incur these. If you don't know what you're doing, you're going to lose a lot of money. That's why it's important to learn these things. Tax laws are intricate. Make sure you consult with a CPA or a tax advisor. I'm not a tax attorney, but I do work with a lot of taxation, so taxes is a very important part of being in business. That's why it's so important, and that's why we talked about it in such detail. So now, this is the big chunk of why we're here today. I mean, I assume, right? We want to learn what the biggest mistakes. From a business attorney's perspective, people come to me saying, hey, I've dealt with this problem, I have this problem come up, I have this problem come up. This is a compiled list of a lot of the reasons why people get into the problems that they are. If you do the opposite of every one of these, I can't guarantee that you're going to be a business because you may just be a bad business person, right? But my point is, you're going to be in a better place than you will be if you ignore and continue to do all of these, okay? So we're going to go through this top 10 list of business mistakes that business owners make. Okay, failing to structure your organization in the best way possible. That goes back to us setting it up as an LLC, corporation, something like that. Now, again, I'm going to go back to what we were talking about. It is a CPA. CPAs, majority of them will set you up with an S corporation. Right? By default, they're going to say, get an S corporation, get an S corporation, get an S corporation. Everybody's out there sitting with an S corporation, and all they own is a car through their company because they drive Uber. Does that sound right? I don't think so. This guy who's driving Uber may not even have anything else going on in their life, and now they have a corporation. This guy needs an LLC, right? So what I mean to say is you don't necessarily need to be afraid of a corporation, but like I was telling you guys earlier in this lecture, being in a corporation versus being in an LLC versus operating on your own creates a lot more complicated reporting requirements. There's a lot more sophisticated things that you have to do to operate your business, and that's why not everybody needs an S corporation. That's why not everybody needs a C corporation. Most people, and I would say about 90%, 95% of the businesses I set up are LLCs because they just fit. They're meant for the everyday man, okay? And that's not to say that every person in this room needs an LLC either. So you want to consider the legal and the tax implications because as a LLC or as a corporation, as a partnership, you can set up, well, not as a partnership, but you can set your businesses up either as a partnership, either as a S corporation, as a C corporation. So that means if you set up an LLC, you can still get that S corporation status, but you still get the simple operational options when it comes to running your business right. Okay? So that's a very complicated way of saying that, but most of the time, like I said, you're going to need an LLC. Okay? Failing to keep your business assets separate from your personal assets. That is one of the biggest issues that I see on a daily basis. That means, okay, well, I'm going to talk about a barber now just because I don't go to the barber anymore. I look great. I don't need to. So, but a barber, they're doing really well, okay? They have a shop. They've got 5 chairs there. All their chairs are rented out. They have their own chair. They're charging people $300 like the guys on Instagram. I don't know who's paying $300 for a haircut, but if you guys are paying it, that's good. You look good, okay? But my point is, that guy's making a lot of money, okay? And whatever they're doing with that money, they decide they want to open an LLC. They put all the money into that. Well, now their personal money's a little gone. They go out and they buy clothes from Macy's. They go out and buy this from here and this from there, from their business account. And that's what's called piercing the corporate veil. That means you're doing actions as yourself through your company. That means you're no longer separating yourself from the company. And that is one of the biggest and easiest ways to lose the protections that you work so hard to create. That's, you spent all this money, time, and energy learning today. Never spend money from your business account on your personal. Never do that, all right? Now, you can do it, but you make sure you pay it back and you keep a clean record of that and make sure it's very, very straightforward and even handwritten and signed if you have to. That's the best way to do it. It's a good idea. It's a good idea to create some kind of ledger or Excel sheet if this has to happen. So, for example, I have 2 businesses. In one of my businesses, I need to buy something, but my other business doesn't have the money for it, right? Or you get what I'm saying. One of the businesses doesn't have the assets and they need to buy something. Well, this other business can buy it for them and they can sell it to this other company or they can loan it to this other company, but it's still technically being owned by this. And that's okay. That is okay, as long as you're paying some type of compensation for it or something like that. But just what I'm trying to get at is there are a lot of people out there who are buying lavish cars and clothes and things like that through their business, and they get a business card from their company that they're working with, and you know, they think that, okay, wow, I have $300,000 in the bank. I might as well just go ahead and blow a little bit of money at the mall. You don't want to do that, right? So that's all I'm trying to get at. Right, there are ways to get around this. You can always fix a mistake before it's too late, but it's better to avoid the mistake in the first place, all right? Failing to have formal agreements in place when doing business with friends and family. Like I was talking about, corporation operating agreement or company agreement. Like I said, you're in a situation, you have friends and family that you want to deal with. Oh, I know this guy. He's like my brother, right? He's never going to do anything wrong to me. Well, now my brother feels like he's not getting paid enough, and he's taking from the business behind your back because he feels like he deserves a little bit more. All of a sudden, my brother is not the same person who I thought he was, and I don't know if this applies to anybody in this room, and I hope it never does, but I do know that it does apply to a lot of people out there. I can say probably in the 10-mile radius, it's probably happening at least five times, right? Because it's that common, right? People do business with the people that they love, and that's okay. But you should do it with caution, making sure you write it down, make sure you get it clearly delineated. Go online, go to Google, go to LegalZoom, go to Taylor Brands, go to Rocket Lawyer. I don't care if you hire me or not, because not everybody in this room will be able to hire me. Most of you have. That's okay. That's great. But my point is, if you don't get a chance to talk to anybody, at least go online and just do it quickly. Figure it out, but never do it without something in writing. Okay? That's my piece of advice for that one. Failing to maintain active status by filing appropriate regulatory. So we're going to talk about just what that means is, okay, you set up your business. Every year you have to file something to keep it active, okay? Otherwise, you lose that business status. Okay, that happens almost, I don't know, all the time. I can't really give you a statistic on it, but a lot of the times if you don't file your franchise tax here in Texas, that means you forfeited your business. That means your business is no longer existing. Anything you've done from the time that you forfeited your business is now on you. Now it's entirely on you. So if you incur debt and they don't check that your business is active, it's not on them to check. You're the one who's responsible for it. So let's say you go out there and get a $50,000 loan while your business has been forfeited. Well, now that loan is on you. It's not on your business. So make sure you're always filing and keeping up to date with your records. Never forget. Okay? Failing to keep regular accounting records and track cash flow. That goes back to me talking about, okay, you're going to be using money from your business, you loan it to yourself, you pay it back, things like that. That's important. But more than that, knowing where your money is going and knowing where it's coming from is super duper important. And the reason I say that is because People get audited, and it's not just from the IRS, it's from your state authorities too. So some people get audited all the time, right? I hope that I never get audited, but the reality is I'll probably get audited in 4 or 5 years as well. It happens, and it's going to happen. If you're doing well in business, it's going to happen. So don't think that you're special in that sense, because it's going to happen. If you're making money and the state sees it or the IRS sees it and they're like, oh wow, this guy's making a lot of money, they're going to come after you. They're going to be like, all right, let me make sure I'm getting all that I need. Maybe I can get a little bit more. And most of the time, they're going to scare you into paying more if you're not ready. So that's why it's important. Be ready. Don't let them take any more money than they have to, okay? Because they're not on your side. Government is not on your side. If somebody comes to your door and says, I'm with the government and I'm here to help, then you turn around, they're not here to help, okay? All right, so failing to maximize deductions and expenses by planning spending. So that's what I was talking about. Same thing, tracking your money, spending your money appropriately, using your deductions, using your expenses appropriately, maximizing the amount of money that you don't have to pay, because I don't want anybody to pay here $1 than they have to, right? That's important. The reason I say that, these are separate from each other, but they're also together. They are separate because one person can do one thing and then the next person in their company forgets to do the other. Each step of the way is important, okay? Failing to understand the legal implications of their business and being ready for any possibility, okay? What that means is, same thing I was talking about with an S corporation. Now I have an S corporation. I'm an Uber driver, okay? I'm going to go back to that situation. Now I'm an Uber driver. Well, I forget that as a S corporation, I have to file something, my minutes, I have to keep a record of all these things, I have to do annual meetings. Well, now I'm in breach of the legal requirements as an S corporation. And if something were to happen, if somebody were to come to me, or if I were to get sued, or if, let's say, my company gets involved with a lawsuit because as an Uber driver, the passengers can sue me, right? That's a possibility. There's a possibility. Now, Uber takes a certain risk. You have insurance, but there's always a possibility. Even if you do everything right, you can still get sued. That's an inherent risk that you take with being in business, okay? That situation means that, okay, well, I didn't file my S corporation filings. Now I'm out of compliance. Now I'm in for a much bigger headache because I didn't do it right. Well, knowing that you're in an S corporation means that you should know how to operate an S corporation. If you don't know how to operate it, then learn. And if you don't learn, then you're going to be screwed. That's just how it is, okay? It's on you. Nobody else is here to babysit you. It's the land of opportunity for a reason. We give you the opportunity to learn as much as we give you the opportunity to earn, okay? So don't forget. Failing to innovate products and use technology to compete in the market, okay? So that means something like somebody in a restaurant who has, let's say somebody who has a deli, right? And for the past 100 years in their family, they've been slicing the cheese because that's what they did traditionally, where every other company, every other restaurant, sandwich shop is using the rotating slicers, and they're still using that slice it with a knife. Well, those sandwiches may taste better, but you're not maximizing, and you're going to eventually lose out, unless your sandwiches are just crazy expensive and you're just spending a lot of money. I mean, if you're spending $80 a sandwich, then yeah, those guys are doing something right, and you should follow them. Right? They're the innovators, okay? They're not the ones that need to innovate, okay? Failing to plan for succession, that means, let's say you get sick and you can't do your part in your business, temporarily even, what's going to happen? Who's going to take care of those responsibilities for you? Put that into your plan. Be ready for it. Let's say you die. Who's going to get your share in the business? Who's going to take the benefits from it? You should put that into your plan as well. Never forget that. Okay? Failing to act timely and constantly procrastinating. I'm a procrastinator. I procrastinate all the time. I'm not saying I'm perfect by any means, but that's so important. If you procrastinate, a lot of people in this room, once you start a business, you're going to get overwhelmed by some aspect of it. And you'll get through it. But the problem is that you might ignore it. And if you ignore it, it can become a way bigger problem. My mom always tells me, open up the mail. Make sure you pay your bills on time. She's always telling me that. Well, that is true. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. There's no faults in what she's told me. Pay your bills. Be on top of your responsibilities. Don't forget that everything counts. And no matter what you do, you've got to take responsibility for your own actions, okay? So that pretty much wraps up all the different tax aspects and the business organization aspects, really just try to tie it in together. Be careful about what entity you select. Regularly review tax deductions and your tax laws that apply to you, and stay informed about the state-specific regulations and advantages. All right? So that does conclude the actual lecture part. I'm here for questions. I'd love to talk to you guys. I might need to get a little bit of water. But anybody have any questions for me? Feel free to ask. And I'm going to open up this camera here to be a little bit bigger.
So you mentioned that when you open a business, you get a $5,000 tax deduction.
Yes, give me 1 second. I'm going to give you this mic. Thank you.
Yeah, so you mentioned that when you start a business, you get a $5,000 tax deduction. Is that for one calendar year of the business, or is that, like, let's say I open it in December and it doesn't roll over into January?
Yes. So that tax deduction of $5,000, it is technically, so if you're only spending $5,000 that year, then yes, that you should use it that year, because you can use it the next year, but the problem is it's not fully deductible. Okay? That $5,000 amount is fully deductible in that first year because of the special law that gives you that. Well, the law is not special, but the special setup in the law gives you that up to $5,000 that year. So that means, let's say through another business, you made a lot of money, you're doing really well, you decide you want to open up another business, right? And you need to spend money to open up that business, and you spent up to $5,000, or let's say you spent over $5,000. As long as you didn't spend more than $50,000, you can deduct that full $5,000 this year, and you should use it this year, because the remaining amount has to be deducted, depreciated over 15 years. So if you fail to use it, you can still use it, but you have to spread it out. All right? So that's why I'm saying it's important for you to know these things, because if you don't use it, you're going to lose it.
That makes sense.
Any other questions? You have some?
Yeah, I got things.
Okay, sure.
I have some more.
Yeah, feel free to ask.
Okay. So, first question is, if I'm getting audited, because it's inevitable, if you're doing well, you're going to get audited. Do you always have to get a lawyer involved, or is that something that you can handle within your business?
Yeah, you really don't have to get a lawyer involved most of the time. It's not going to be beneficial to you, because lawyers are not necessarily the right people for this. Now, if they are claiming, for example, let's say you've done everything you need to, you keep all of your record for it, you tell them, hey, I've paid all of my taxes, and now they're still hitting you with a big amount. Well, in that situation, you might need a lawyer, because that lawyer is going to be able to cut through the government's heavy talk and really get to the bottom of it. Maybe take them to court. Maybe basically settle outside of court, whatever the case may be. But in the event of that, you would usually use a CPA or accountant, right? So that's why it's so important to have the records, because the records are going to be more important than the person you have representing you. Because if you have records for everything that you're doing, then your situation is going to change it quite a bit. All right, so I've made $2 million this year. I've spent this much on products and inventory, and I've spent this much on equipment, right? If I've paid my sales use tax on the equipment, and I've collected the appropriate amount of sales tax, and I've already paid it to the government, then I don't owe anything. I shouldn't have to owe anything, because all you have to do is show that very clearly. All right? There's no reason, right? But if you have a situation where you've bought something from out of state, right? You bought a piece of equipment from out of state, or you bought, that's usually the case, right? A lot of the times you're not going to pay taxes on that, because typically that person doesn't collect taxes in your state. So if I'm buying something from Wyoming that's worth $10,000, I'm just going to pay them $10,000. That doesn't mean I don't pay taxes. I still owe taxes on that amount. I owe, I think, the sales tax amount of, in Texas, I think it's 6.25% is the state mandated amount. So that means 6.25% is what I owe on top of what I purchase. Just because I didn't pay it in that state doesn't mean that I don't owe it. And it's my responsibility to report that. Whenever you go in and it says sales and use tax, that's what use tax means. So make sure you put that. Other than that, there's really not too much risk.
So question regarding that, like let's say I have a CPA or somebody who is designated to handle my paperwork, and I get audited, and that person who's in the position doesn't technically do their job right, but they're not within my company. Is it possible to sue them if I'm going through more challenges with my audit?
Well, it depends on what they're doing, right? Just like with a lawyer, just like with a doctor, most CPAs carry malpractice insurance because there is something considered malpractice, right? So malpractice is the situation where they've knowingly or should have known that they were supposed to do better. That means if I were to advise you as a lawyer, hey, you should go ahead and walk across the street when the light is red, that's on me for advising you that, because the law is clearly the opposite, right? I mean, it's very clear. So that's a very clear-cut example of it, but that's just another situation, right, with an accountant or a CPA. Accountants, not so much. They do get certain protections, but CPAs, they typically have to require, or their firms typically hold some type of malpractice insurance. So in that situation, you can sue them, but it depends on what they've done wrong.
That makes sense. Okay, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? I'd love to talk a little bit about a few examples. Yeah? Can you take the mic over to me?
So what kind of tactics would like IRS or the government, like if they try to come after you, like what are ways to prevent that? Like if you have everything in order in your business and stuff, and then like you were mentioning, if they'll try to come after you for more money than you actually owe them or something like that. So like ways to just prevent that or just make sure everything's on track. So.
Well, at the end of the day, you can play politics and you can just pay to some contribution fund of some politician if you really wanted to really avoid it, right? I mean, that's how a lot of people stay off the radar. I mean, because like I said, that's politics, right? So they're not going to come after Apple or Microsoft as easily because they've made big contributions. Although Apple and Microsoft are getting audited all the time. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, for example, they're much bigger because they're paying and they're more in the public eye. And well, and they're international public offerings as well. So that's a different situation. But for example, right, a large company that is making campaign contributions to politicians and to the federal government, things like that, they're paying more than their share. Typically, they're at a lower risk, and that's not guaranteed, right? Because if you're in that type of industry that is inherently like full of bad people, then you're possibly going to get audited at that situation as well. Right. My point is, right, you can reduce your risk of a headache by being ready, but there's not so much that you can do as far as reducing your risk of getting an audit, right? It's inevitable, right? So if you don't ever go into business, that's the only way you can prevent it, right? Individuals rarely get audited compared to the manner of businesses. That's just the way things are. So, any other follow-up to that?
No, that was perfect.
Okay. Cool. Anybody else over here?
If you were a licensed professional and you want to take advantage of the deductions, would you ever recommend them opening a business solely to take advantage of the deductions?
Well, it depends, right? Let's say you're taking and investing money somewhere, or how are you making your money? That's the first question. If you're already doing well and you want to take these deductions,
right?
Couldn't you take them without having to open up another business?
But wouldn't that be a lot of let's say I think it was 179. Doesn't that only pertain to business ownerships?
No, you can do it as a person as well. So all the tax deductions that we do apply to sole proprietorships as well. So let's say I do open up a business as a sole proprietor, which means that I don't have a business at all. I'm just operating under Sunny City, right? I can still use 179. I can still use any of these tax deductions because I'm technically doing business. The difference, though, is that we're now using an entity to protect ourselves and to protect our assets by dividing it. And now those deductions and expenses apply to that business versus me applying it directly to my name or to my own assets, right? So as a person, if you are, let's say you're making money through a job, you can't take advantage of some of these deductions because they don't apply to you, right? But if you're a business owner in any fashion or form, all the tax deductions are available to you. Now it's up to you to decide whether you want to protect yourself at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So tell me, from your example, how are you making that money?
If I had a day job and I was making $200,000 a year.
Okay.
But then if I had a side job and I was making a lot less, and let's say I was making $25,000,
Right.
but it was still a service that I was offering as a side job.
Sure.
Is it possible to take it is it possible to take money from my day job and put it into that business?
Yeah.
Legally?
Yes, absolutely. So you can take money and put it into that business. You can invest it into that. You can use it for certain expenses. Let's say, okay, in that same situation, I've got $200,000 of income coming in. Is that post-tax or pre-tax?
Post-tax.
Post-tax, okay. So that means you're making a lot more than that. So now you've got that tax amount of the difference. So if you're making $200,000 post-tax, you're probably making, I don't know, $350,000. You're already paying $150,000 in taxes or so, something like that. You're paying a pretty big amount, and then this is just an example, right?
Correct.
But that $150,000 is what you can use to your benefit. Now you want to try to take, you want to open up a business, you want to rent a car, you want to rent an office, you want to do all these things. All of your expenses and everything add up to being $100,000 that year. Well, you can use that against your tax due amount, and now because your business is losing money, you're reporting a loss through your business, which means that you're going to get a refund for that $100,000 because you've already spent that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you can do that technically, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually legal. But what happens is when you start taking a loss in every business over the long period of time, you're going to get audited, and they're going to be like, why are you in business? What are you doing wrong? Like, why don't you make some money, man? Come on. Like, you can report very little income. That's fine. But if you don't make up money at any point, then assume that they're going to come after you and be like, you're trying to evade taxes here. And that's a bad thing, right? But if you're doing it legitimately and you're using it to create a legitimate business, you can always use your income that way.
Okay.
Any other questions? Nope. You want to ask? Okay, great. Hey, I like questions. I think this is very, very helpful.
So, let's say I have a hobby business that's not technically a business, and at some period, like in a season, I make a significant amount, and I haven't established it as a business at that point. Is there like an opportunity for the government to come after me if it's going into my personal bank account? But that's only one season, and then the season after that, it just goes down.
Yes. So the IRS gives you a limited amount of hobby income that you can make that is basically tax-free. So the average from most of the recent years has been about 5,000 or 6,000. So that means if you make up to 5,000 or 6,000, it may be different this year, maybe 8,000, maybe a little bit more inflation could have taken place. I haven't really thought about this in a while, but there is a specific amount. If you make over that amount, then you're due taxes. Even if you have a job right now, let's say you have a job and you work at McDonald's and you're only making $4,500 a whole year. Well, you don't even have to file a tax return because you're not getting taxed. It's not required of you to do anything. And if you don't make any money, you don't have to file a tax return. You don't owe any taxes. I mean, that's just the way things are. So that exception amount, if you exceed that, then it's your obligation legally to put that on your tax return. Now, people avoid it by doing business in cash, by doing business in favors, by doing things as promises to do in exchange, things like that, right? You can avoid it in some ways, fashions, and forms, but legally speaking, you're required to put that on your tax return.
So currently, like, I have an Etsy store,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that they take taxes off of that every purchase.
Sure.
So if I end up making, let's say the dollar amount is 5,000 for your cap for a business or hobby, right? So, well, at that point, I need to file it with my personal taxes, or do I need to establish a sole proprietor business
Yeah, so
to do it?
you're technically operating as a sole proprietor if you've never set up your LLC anyways. So you don't have to do anything to set up as a sole proprietor. You don't even have to file a DBA. A lot of people just do that to say, hey, I have a company, I have a DBA. A DBA is nothing. It's just a piece of paper saying, hey, my name is Sonny, but call me Big Daddy. You know, like you can do that, that's fine. And then I'm just saying, that's obviously, I wanted to see everybody smile here. So my point is that doesn't do anything for you, right? It's just a piece of paper. Now, legally filing it and paying the filing fee, things like that, that's what gives you protection, right? But if you don't set up anything, you're a sole proprietor. You, in this situation, you do have your LLC. So you are not a sole proprietor. You have an LLC. But even if you don't make up to that amount, you don't have to put that onto your tax return.
That makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, please.
Can you educate me a little bit on, depending on which type of corporation we set up, is it better for, when and where is it better for me to pay myself a higher rate, taxes-wise, or is it better to pull it from the bottom?
So that's not a bad question, right? So I guess it just depends, right? So you have a business, right? You're in business now, and you're in this situation. Are you paying yourself a salary?
True.
Yes. Okay. So as a business owner, there are two ways to pay yourself. All right, and this is why people set up S corporations. This is why it's so important. Okay. S corporation gives you the ability to pay yourself as an employee. Okay. So LLC filing as an S corporation will do the same. So that's typically what you want. If you don't file as an S corporation, then you technically don't have the right to have employees. Okay, so that means you have to convert over to S corporation status to actually be able to pay your employees, right? So that's the first thing, all right? Second thing is, as an S corporation, you can pay yourself through distributions, or you can pay yourself as an employee, all right, which means you take a salary. So salary is an expense. Distributions are capital returns to the owner, all right? So now capital returns are taxed at a self-employment rate, and your salary is employed at the individual rate, or taxed at the individual rate, okay? So it may be better if your amount that you're being taxed at is, let's say you're getting, I'm just trying to come up with a good example of how it makes sense. Well, okay, you have a business that's making $500,000, okay? $500,000, you pay yourself $150,000. Well, now you're at a higher tax rate, but that's your individual tax rate. That means you're not taking any distribution, you're not taking any ownership share return, okay? You're just taking your employment salary. So you're out of your employment salary, you are deducting that from your business. Now your business only has $350,000 that it can be taxed at. That means that $350,000 is going to be taxed at the same rate as your individual income, unless that's going to another person or that's going to another person. That may be where it's important or beneficial for you to have a C corporation, because a C corporation separates your taxation. That means your C corporation is going to be taxed at that $350,000 amount, and then you're taxed separately at that $150,000 amount. Okay? Does the situation make sense now? Yeah. But let's say you bring your income down a little bit. Okay, your income is down to $200,000. Okay, for your whole company, and you're getting paid $50,000 out of that. Well, in that $50,000 amount, you're only getting taxed at a minimal percentage rate. You're only getting taxed at about 18 to 20%, if I'm not wrong, maybe 22%. I can't remember the exact number. But the bracket is much, much less, okay? And you're getting taxed at that. Well, that extra $150,000, that can go onto your individual tax return, and that just bumps you up to, I think, 30%, right? That's a big amount of money for sure. But that's where you can use other expenses and deductions and things like that. That may be beneficial to you. But let's say you don't take any money from your account as an employee. Let's say you just have a company and you're getting paid through checks. At the end of the year, you and your partner split up that $200,000, $100,000 here, $100,000 here. That person, you as that employer, or you as that company owner, is going to get taxed through self-employment tax, which is typically 12, 15%, I think, something like that. And then income tax is whatever income tax bracket you fall into at that point, right? It's going to cost you a little bit more to get paid that way, but it could be a little cleaner for you in the long run. So it just depends. Really, the amount of money that you make is a big determination of where that goes.
That helps.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Any other questions, guys? Okay, perfect. Well, that's going to wrap up the lecture. We appreciate it. I had a few more people come in than at the end of it, and I hope everybody who's live streaming it enjoyed as well. Feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Once again, if you go onto our website, saytlegal.com, you can get the free business guide. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We look forward to the next one. We're going to be having another lecture here in about a month and a half. That one's going to be a virtual lecture, so it's not going to be in person. But before the end of the year, I plan to do at least 2 more in person. So if anybody here has any questions or anything individual you want to ask me, feel free to come on up. And then if you have ideas for the next lecture or anything like that, I'll be happy to help and answer. Thank you, guys.
Good job, Sammy. That's why I sent you to school for.